Mr. Jacobs, we are set.
May I have a motion to reconvene the public meeting at 7:58 PM?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can we rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty,
Justice for all.
With regard to board announcements, I have two brief board announcements. Today, as everybody's hearing on the radio, is the 1-year anniversary of the COVID pandemic. And I think when we all first encountered it, we felt it was going to be a shorter duration than it actually planned or played out to be. And I know it's been a tremendous effort on the district, on the staff to provide the education curriculum we've been able to do under the situations that have been mandated to us by the various regulations and authorities. And it's a dynamic situation that continues to play out and continues to be dynamic. And I appreciate the staff and the administration's efforts to try and stay abreast of the constantly changing regulations as they affect how we can and cannot administer our education. So I thank you for the effort and the dedication that you have to the students. The other thing, along with dedication, is we've been running the food pantry for several weeks now. And we've been able to serve, I believe we're serving now over 100 families within our district that are in need of the services of the food pantry. And, the food pantry has been championed by a group of our staff that has truly provided a lot of time and energy to do the distributions of the food and as well as gather, excuse me, as well as gather the food that we can provide to these families in need. So I truly appreciate it, and the board as a whole recognizes the effort for those involved with the food pantry and how we're able to serve these families of our district that are desperately in need of the food pantry services, and truly appreciative of what we're doing for that. And I further to that, reach out to any other, staff members or community members that want to provide help and support to the food pantry, because the response we're getting from these families is truly appreciative. And it's, to some of them, it's truly food on their table that takes one pressure, one stress away from their other, stresses in life. So, I'm very glad that we were able to do it, and I appreciate everybody's effort. And the more people that we get involved, the more people we can serve. And and unfortunately, there are those families in our district that need that service. So thank you. We have the Board of Elections coming up for the board seats that are available in the May vote. And at the previous meeting, I read a issue regarding the nominations for petitions for board seats, and there was a change to the regulations. So I'm going to read the revised regulations this evening. The legislation regarding the numbers of signatures on nominating petitions has been signed by the governor, Chapter 7 laws of 2021, and therefore you should use the 2019 election numbers for your nominating petitions. Therefore, the number of signatures needed on a candidate's petition is 32, 2% of the 2019 voting population. The annual budget vote and election of board members will take place on Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. On June 30th, 2021, the term of office expires for board member Thomas Henry. Nominating petitions will be available in the district clerk's office beginning Monday, March 1st, 2021. The number of signatures needed on a candidate's petition is 76, 2% of last year's voting population. Petitions must be submitted to the office of the district clerk no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, April 19th, 2021. For more information, you can contact Kathy Muscari at 845-680-1012. With that, I turn it over to Dr. Pritchard for his superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Good evening, everyone. I want to very quickly echo Mr. Jacobs' sentiment. On Thursday, March 12th, 2020, we literally stood shoulder to shoulder with this group of volunteers, this Board of Education, and I'm grateful for your leadership as we've maneuvered through these incredibly challenging times. And we've relied upon your leadership and your guidance. We, this community, and we are grateful for your service to that end. And we are still in it, and we still are grateful and reliant upon your good leadership and your wisdom. But I speak on behalf of our administrative team. Thank you for the support that you've given us. I'm proud of our staff, our teachers, who come to work every day under conditions of uncertainty. And I also want to say a debt of gratitude to our families and to our parents who have oftentimes faced challenges and oftentimes made sacrifices towards providing the very best for their children. And for that, we are indebted to them for their partnership. We have a few things to share this evening as it relates to our program here. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Mr. Greg Strauss, who is a medical professional. This past sports season, we've been involved in higher risk sports, and I know that there's been some misconceptions about the testing protocol. And I've asked Greg, as our medical professional, to provide us with some accurate insight as to the testing protocol. But before I do that, for those of you, and I know we have a big audience at home who have tuned in tonight for a variety of reasons, but I know some folks at home who are listening to this Zoom meeting are here because you have an interest in this because your children do participate in our programs. And I did put out a communication today, and in very simple terms, check your email, check your inboxes. We talk a little bit about our protocol and some of the recent changes from the Rockland County Department of Health as it relates to the administration of the surveillance testing protocol. That we initially conduct surveillance testing using the rapid testing. In the event that there is a positive result, we follow up with something called a PCR lab-based test to verify that. That's something very new, and I won't go into it because I'm not a medical professional, but there is information. There was information sent out this morning to the families of our athletes that will describe that in a little bit greater detail. But I did ask Greg to be here this evening to talk a little bit about some of the data associated with the rapid testing. Greg, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just quickly give us an overview of the surveillance screening protocol that we have been using for our winter season sports with our athletes. So good evening, Greg.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to explain what the COVID procedures are in terms of screening. The goal is to ultimately screen athletes to ensure that they are
Greg, you're muted.
basically, we're using Abbott Binex cards. Those are the cards that we're doing. To date, we've done 330 tests for the district. Out of the 330 tests that we've done for the district, 14 have come back positive, which is a percentage positive rate of 4.24%. So that's very, very low. In terms of Binex testing, it is a rapid antigen test. And there's something called specificity, and then there's something called sensitivity. Being that we are screening for negatives and asymptomatic patients or people or students, whatever you would like to call them, we care about the negatives because we're assuming that everybody is negative and they're asymptomatic. If they're symptomatic, they wouldn't be there, they wouldn't have anything. When we use these Binex cards, and like I said, they're designed for screenings in general, the accuracy rate in the specificity of the test is 99.8%. That means those that are truly negative are negative. They do not have COVID. In terms of sensitivity, in terms of those that are truly positive on these cards, that rate in the asymptomatic, that means they don't have any symptoms, they are walking around and you test them and they're positive, that rate is 35.8%. And in the symptomatic patients, those are going to be positive at 64.2%. So really the point of these cards is to screen negative people. That means those people that we assume do not have COVID, because we're looking at the specificity of the test in general. Meaning if I think somebody is positive for COVID, I'm not going to be using this test on them because it's not the appropriate test to use. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, in terms of like false positives or false negatives, as I said, the false positive rate is extremely low on these because we care about the negatives. And those are the outliers. In terms of the positives, that's going to be low as well, because when we talk about sensitivity, the sensitivity is lower and there are many variables that can affect the sensitivity for a screening of somebody that's positive. For instance, there's something called viral load. When somebody has COVID, let's say the test requires you to have 100 particles of COVID to turn the test positive. That day, you could have 98 particles and test negative. The next day, you could have 100 particles and test positive. The following day, you could have 98 particles again and test negative. And this is why people can have positive, negative, positive results within the span of a few days. And then you wonder which one is positive and which one is negative. In which case, and specifically why we're using these Binex cards, is because we care about the negatives. So the question is there a possibility of a false positive? The answer is always yes. That is not in my control. That is not in anybody's control, because there are many things that can affect a positive test in terms of sensitivity. Many, many factors can affect the sensitivity. Now, if we take the values of the sensitivity, that means if somebody has symptomatic symptoms of COVID, and we know that the sensitivity rate is 64%, is that truly positive for COVID? And the answer is it's about 78 to 80% positive on a PCR that it'll be accurate. So you're looking at these tests as accurate if they're positive for symptomatic, and you're looking at them if they're negative, they're very negative. Does that answer some questions? It's a little complicated, I get that, but on this specific case, on this specific test, we care about the specificity of the test for negative. We are not caring about the positives. Any positive that we do have will reflect on a PCR test, and the PCR test will tell us if that's truly positive or negative. Questions?
So can I summarize? So Greg, I think you've said that we've administered somewhere over 300 of these cards to
Yes.
screen. And of those 300 some odd cards, what was the positive number again?
14, which is 4.2%.
So of those 14 positives out of 300, and I think you said 350, how many of those 14 were, have we determined are indeed false positives?
I think 2 were positive out of the 14.
Okay. So if I'm a parent of an athlete and I'm at home, and I'm going to be very upset. I could be very upset. It could be very upsetting for me to see that, knowing that my child may or may not be able to participate. My next steps now, as of yesterday, in accordance with Rockland County Department of Health protocol, is that the Binex test can be challenged or
Correct.
can be challenged using the PCR lab-based, which if I were to get that test done for my child, or if let's say I'm a coach, I don't want to just assume it's just a student, but if I'm an individual and I go to get that test, the PCR lab-based test, now that I can do that, I can challenge that result, that positive. And truthfully, if I'm testing positive on a screening test, you should probably get a PCR lab-based test anyway, regardless of whether it's whether you perceive it to be false or not, because you may indeed have COVID. So that to me would be the greater issue in terms of stopping the spread of COVID. But I just want our families to know that in the event that this card does indicate a positive, that the next step, in accordance with the most recent directives from the Rockland County Department of Health, is to go get a PCR lab-based test.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions? Are there any questions? Can I answer any questions?
Do we know how the Binex test is being used elsewhere throughout the state or throughout the country in terms of the determination of utilizing that particular test for doing what we're doing?
We're doing it in accordance with the common standards of the United States right now as a screening, as a negative screening.
Do any other board members have any other questions for Mr. Strauss? Mr. Strauss, speaking for the board, I appreciate the education you provided us in terms of the clarity of the purpose of the test, as well as the clarification of the difference between the sensitivity. I think it was tremendously beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good night. Be well, everybody.
So the next item on the superintendent's report agenda is the PTA president's report. I know we did run a little bit long in executive session tonight. Obviously, we had a lot to talk about. So I apologize to everyone at home, but again, I do believe it was important work, and I think we did have an excellent discussion. But I just want to check and see if our PTA is here. I know we had invited them, and I'm not so sure I see them as participants.
Dr. Pritchard, they left a message. They'll be happy to report out at our next meeting, giving timing.
Great. Well, again, my apologies to them, and certainly my gratitude for all their hard work, and we'll have more to share out at the next meeting. Next on our agenda is the capital project update. And I see that we have Lauren Tarcio here, our architect. Lauren, will you be giving the update this evening?
Guys, also there's Lou Rodriguez is here. I'm sorry I couldn't. My bandwidth is bad where I'm at, so I'm on the phone.
Hey Lou, how are you? I see the 914 there. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
And Lauren to just put up the memo, and just if you need me to put up anything else for you guys to speak with, just let me know.
So what I would simply put, I figured I'd just give a quick overview on the contracts, phase 2C, and then hand it over to Lauren for more detailed. But phase 2C, we had Grace Contracting for the GC. We had Joe Lombardo for the plumbing. HVS was involved. Integrity Mechanical, Dan Clayton, Nickerson. All of these contracts were at 5.4 million, and total to date, not including what Lauren may talk about tonight, inclusive of, we have about $47,000 in change orders that were part of this project, so we're less than 1% on phase 2C. So we're feeling really good about that. So right now we're in the process of just closing all of these contractors out. Grace Contracting in particular is the only one that has work that we're waiting for. The toilet partitions were to be installed this week. And then the wall graphics were supposed to be done today, but we've heard that the wall graphics in the library were not done today. So that's really the outstanding scope of work. But everyone else close out, and we're in a good place with dollars and cents. So I think, phase 2C. Really great position, 5.4 million, $47,000 in change orders, and less than 1% on change orders. So I think everyone should be, real happy about that. So Lauren, that's up next.
So just to follow up on what Lou said, I think we did have a very successful project. Financially speaking, I'll go through. Alicia has this memo on the screen right now. This first page just speaks to really what Lou just spoke about, which is, where all the scopes of work are, what the contractors are up to, and how much is completed. So as you can see, for phase 2C, we are pretty much complete with the exception of that wall graphic, which we weren't informed of until today, was not going to be complete today. So if you want to go to the second page. So this is the budget breakdown for all the phases. So if you recall, this entire project spanned over 2 summers. We started with a total bond amount of $11,550,000. We allocated an incidental budget of roughly $2.1 million, which left us a construction budget of about $9.4 million. So this project was broken into 3 phases. Phase 2A was the CLE modular library, which came in at $373,000, and that's where that project closed out at. Phase 2B, which was some work at Schaefer and Tappan Zee, that was closed out. You can see each of the contracts there: $737,000 for GC, $145,000 for plumbing, $846,000 for mechanical. Electrical was at $228,000, and then we had the turf field at the high school that came in at $811,000. So then when we came to phase 2C, these numbers right now are about where we are. That's where we're closed out at. We've come to $2.65 million for the GC. The plumbing contract was at $387,000. The mechanical at just over $1 million. Electrical contract at $539,000. And then we had a couple of cooperative bidding vendors as well. So Dan Clayton, who did your grandstands and press box, they came in at $666,000. That's where they finished. Nickerson, who did the casework in the buildings, that was $134,000. So in the end, out of the $11.5 million, the incidental budget, we're very close with that, and Alicia can speak more to that. But since we had the construction budget of 9.4, we really came in at 8.6. So we still have over $800,000 that is still left over on that bond. So Alicia, I don't know if you want to talk more to the incidental.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. So this is just a quick, simple budget summary from phase two, basically reconciling our financial records with those of Lauren's, and then comparing actual expense and some things still outstanding. So pretty similar to what Lauren and Lou just mentioned. Right now, with actual expenses paid to date, as far as the district is concerned, we're at just about 9.8 million. And we still have about 499,302 still encumbered to finish out paying out Grace and HVS. And we have one payment in for Nickerson. And this is really a timing thing between what Lauren has and what we have, because we list it as part of our summaries when it becomes actualized, when it's actually paid and it's in our hands. So once that is paid, everything's paid out, we would have spent about $10.3 million on total phase 2C. So again, out of the $11.5 million roughly, which 9.8 million of that was the authorization from the capital reserve, with the remaining monies being the budgeted transfer to capital dollars at the $1,750,000. We also had, based on unencumbered balances, about $350,000 left over that wasn't allocated to any particular incidental expense. So right now, with where we are and really just the final closeout process, it's projected that we'll return just a little over $1 million to the capital reserve. So mechanically and in terms of our accounting, it'll flow back to fund balance at June 30th and then be returned to the reserve. This one, because a majority of these monies came for our capital reserve, it needs to be returned to the capital reserve. One of the things that I did want to point out tonight for consideration, and I know that Dr. Pritchard and myself and just through previous facilities and board workshops have mentioned the Cottage Lane Modular Library and the lease through Cassones. So you'll notice at the bottom that the analysis on the modular library, which the lease is up mid-July this year, that lease has been paid through the capital fund as long as 2A has been open till date. So with some credits that they're willing to do, if we were to consider purchasing the modular from the capital fund with these leftover monies by the end of April, all done and told, it would cost us about $109,000. And so the deal would be is we would still have to pay April's lease payment, but May, June, and July, we would not be obligated to pay. And then we would also get a credit for not needing to have any type of demo or removal of the library done. So some of these decisions, hopefully just maybe coming up at one of our next workshops, or if the board would like some more information, I can provide more than what's been provided here tonight. Before we fully close out phase two, we will need to make at least a preliminary decision if we are going to entertain purchasing this modular, because it would make sense to do so while this capital project is still open and utilize the dollars that were originally allocated towards phase 2A of this project. And we can certainly do that. Right now, based on our aid flow, we'll file our final cost project reports. We'll have them ready to go, but we will file them after July 1 so that the building aid starts to flow back to our revenue stream, beginning with the 21-22 fiscal year. So we're well positioned to go ahead and submit that. Everything on our end in terms of documentation and analysis between what the architect and the CM have to what we have has been reconciled. So we're just waiting for just the Grace really is the main one to receive just the final release of retainages from Lauren and Lou. And then we can fully close out all three segments of this project. So we're really in good shape. And I said this $1 million would then, minus if we decide on the Cottage Lane Modular Library, would be returned to the capital reserve, which is a good thing. It can be used for future projects. So Mr. Jacobs.
Yeah, with regard to the discussion regarding the CLE Modular Library and the purchase of that, just for clarity, I'd like to know if we purchase it under the phase 2 capital project, would that then become aidable as well? Whereas if we don't purchase it and we continue the lease payments using the general fund money, then we're not getting aid on that. Is that correct?
So with phase 2A, we wouldn't generate any building aid because whether we continue to lease it or purchase it, it's not aidable as a modular unit. However, right now, we do have the benefit of the capital fund, as we can see by the budget remaining. We do have those dollars available. At this point in the year, with this fiscal year general fund budget, to spend $110,000 out of the general fund may not be, maybe a little tight at this point in the year, considering our fund balance projections and monies that are designated for some of the summer work. But general fund, to your point, Mr. Jacobs, if we did expend that purchase out of the general fund, the positive side of that is that that would be an expense as part of our overall general fund expenditures that would generally be part of our calculations for our general aid, state aid receipt. But it's really lumped into our ST3 for our overall expense, not singled out for building aid.
So the issue is if we make the decision to purchase it outright now, we can use the capital funds that are within the phase 2 and avoid having it affect the general fund and avoid having to budget for it.
Correct. Correct. And Mr. Jacobs, you make a good point, and thank you for the reminder. I meant to just point that out. If there was a decision not to purchase it on the other end, you're exactly correct. We would have to budget in the general fund budget to continue to make lease payments for this modular unit. It's just that now they would have to be paid moving forward from the general fund. Okay.
And then just going back to closing out the contractors for the phase 2 capital project. I noticed this morning as I passed the building, the project sign is still up at the middle school. Who's responsible for removing that, and when would that get removed?
Grace will be removing that. I'll make sure he gets over there this week and gets that done.
Okay. Do any other board members have any questions?
One quick question. When does the lease expire on the library?
It's the middle of July. It's around July 13th. And then under the original proposal, we do have those options to continue to lease. But the original lease is up, I believe, July 13th.
So how will this move forward in terms of ultimate decision one way or the other? Will this go back to the facilities committee for a recommendation, or is it going to come in a board report for a recommendation? Just so that we know how it's going to play out, because I don't want this to linger on and we wind up paying more lease payments than we have to. And I also wanted to, to be able to close out phase 2.
Absolutely. So on that note, Mr. Jacobs, what I could do is put a recommendation in this Friday's board report. And if we get the unofficial direction from the board, we'll prepare a board resolution for our next meeting for March 23rd for board acceptance. Because if we do decide on this, I'd like to take advantage of that April window as well and get as many of these, definitely get the about $11,000, almost $12,000 in credits. So we could move forward as long as the board has officially approved it on resolution.
I'd also ask you to go back to the vendor and ask them to sharpen their pencil a little bit and see if we can make it a nice round number.
Yeah, I've had, I'll put it as I've had several conversations with them already, so. But I wanted to make sure that, we had talked about this in facilities committee a while back and also at, with the full board. So it is one of these kind of loose ends that we're still hanging out there. So I definitely wanted to give the board an update tonight and also give you an opportunity just to digest some of this information. Because I know we've been talking about capital work for a while and some of the summer work coming up. So just trying to put the whole picture together. But I agree, Mr. Jacobs, definitely the importance here is tying out the rest of the paperwork and the payments. And one thing that Lauren and Lou are finalizing as well, and Lauren, I just want to mention this, is that as any project, when you're closing out contracts, any final credits. You guys, I think all the allowances have been used, but I know there is still some credits and other things coming our way for final closeout for Grace and HVS. So we'll see that. You'll see that as well in the board report, but that should be everything. And then we'll close out the contracts.
A quick question also on the library. So I do recall that, the design of the foundation for the modular library was, really structurally sound. However, if we do now decide to make it not a modular and really more of a permanent structure, is there anything that the architect would recommend that may be needed to ensure that it is permanent, or has that already been designed into the construction?
Yeah, so the foundations that are there are of a permanent nature. They're on piers right now, but they are 4 feet in the ground below the frost line. The only thing that might be of interest, and I'd have to look at the drawings to even see if you need access to underneath the modular, is maybe you want to infill between the piers, so you have less of a chance of maybe rodents getting in. But now you have the vinyl skirting, so it's doing its job. But that might be the only recommendation I might make.
And no concerns about the roof or the siding?
No, I mean, this is a legitimate building. It may be of a temporary nature, but it is still a real building. Just came in on wheels.
Okay.
What's the anticipated lifespan of the building?
So it all depends on how well you take care of the building. I mean, I've seen these modulars, they always go up as a temporary measure, and then they're there for 30 years. So, I'm taking one down in another district that's probably about that old, 35 years old. Could it continue to survive? Yes. But it does need maintenance like every other building. So it's not unheard of that they're several decades old.
Thank you.
I've taken down modular buildings that have been in place for 15 to 20 years. That's not what you want to do, but they will last. It's built right, but I don't think it was something you guys were looking to stick with for a long period of time. I don't think, but it's a secure, solid building.
If there's not any other questions, I'd just like to thank Lauren and Lou for your patience this evening. It's important to showcase all the work that's been done over the 2 summers. And we're at the end of it. It seems like in a way, it went so fast with these phases of work that it's fine. It's complete now. So we'll submit as of July 1. So thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Lou, for this closeout process. I know it's been pretty comprehensive towards this last couple of weeks with us trying to get everything in.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's patience on it. Sometimes it's difficult to get the contractors to fall in line at this juncture.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate your support, and it was successful, and we're really happy about how things went. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you, Ms. Tarcio. Given in the interest of time, I know that on the agenda this evening, we have a 2021-2022 budget development overview. That's largely informational in nature. And what I had intended to do was put together a timeline and show you where we were at with regard to our milestones. That's something that we will put into your Board of Education weekly report tomorrow. But I think that this evening I would like to skip to the K-2 in-person learning plan, because I suspect that most of our audience here this evening is tuned in to hear the concept of how we're going to reintroduce some of our younger learners back into an in-person learning model. And with that, I would like to introduce or reintroduce Miss Beglin and also Mr. Galvin, who will be taking us through what I think is going to be a much anticipated and well-received plan. It's taken us a few weeks to consider what all the intricacies and all the details were as they related to logistics. But I think we do have a good plan, as I think you'll see this evening. And with that, as I said, without further delay, I'll introduce Ms. Beglin. Ms. Beglin, are you there?
I am here.
There you go.
Richard, thank you for letting us come and speak this evening. Before we get started, I just want to say that Mr. Galvin and myself are both here presenting from William Schaefer this evening. We are in two separate offices, doors closed, windows open. So we are going to be removing our masks for this important presentation this evening, but we want all of our viewers to know that we always have masks on at all times when in the school building, all staff do. But for purposes of this evening, we will remove our masks. Maybe I should put it back on. Okay, so we're going to get started this evening. Good evening, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present our plan for returning all kindergarten, first, and second grade students to in-person learning at William O. Schaefer. I know that I speak for all of us when I say that we believe that the students of South Orangetown Central School District deserve a high-quality education in a safe environment, and we are very proud of the work that the district and schools have done during this unprecedented time this year. We know that our district's youngest students would benefit from additional in-person learning opportunities. Since the beginning of the school year, we have been looking at opportunities to bring more students back to school. We started with students with IEPs, then ENL students, then students with 504s, and most recently, students who required additional social, emotional, and/or academic support. As we had success with integrating each of these additional groups of students into our building, we began to engage in conversations with central office to see what we could do and what could be done to help our youngest students. We targeted this specific group of students because they demonstrated significant difficulty independently managing the demands of hybrid instruction. And I believe that all parents of young students would agree with us. So to start this evening, we wanted to share a timeline around these conversations and the development of our plan. So yeah, we have the plan for the key dates, great. So we started on my first day back at William O. Schaefer here on February 22nd. We started with an in-person learning task force, which consisted of parents, teachers, and administrators from all of the buildings. We met with ESO leadership. Then we shared the plan with our staff here at William O. Schaefer, as well as with PTA Council. And we are planning on sending communication to families tomorrow. And then there will be a follow-up task force meeting on Monday where we will continue to share out the specifics of our plan. Starting tomorrow night, we will be handing over our larger spaces, such as the cafeteria, the gym, and the library to the facilities department to start setting up these spaces. William O. Schaefer staff will then work to prepare our spaces leading up to spring break and then directly after our spring break. And they will finalize all of our plans for a full in-person return to school for all kindergarten, first, and second grade students on Tuesday, April 6th.
Thank you. So when we began to formulate a plan to return all of our students back to school, we developed principles that would help guide all of our future decisions. We committed ourselves to assuring that every student's current classroom teacher would remain the same, that we could meet all of the mandated services that are required for our classified ENL and 504 students, that our academic programs such as reading, writing, math, science, and social studies would not be compromised, that all of our students would continue to be able to participate in our specials such as art, music, PE, library, and technology classes, and that we would be able to continue to provide all of our built-in level supports such as reading, math, and social emotional services, all while adhering to 6 feet of social distancing in all spaces. With these principles in mind, we worked through several different scenarios until we found one that we felt would work best for our students. As of right now, we have 2 plans. One plan would account for the return of our entire student body, and the other plan accounts for the number of 100% distant learners to remain relatively consistent with a majority of our hybrid students electing to attend school on a 100% basis. What we are going to be asking the parents to do is to choose either a 100% in school or a 100% virtual model for the remainder of the school year.
Great. So next we want to talk through what the logistics of this will look like. And so as Mr. Galvin had explained, we started with a plan and then we continued to tweak it and look at all the different components of it. And, you know, with speaking with central office and all of the different stakeholders, we started to kind of refine our plan. So as he said, right now we have 2 different versions of a plan. So when we began to sketch out the logistics of what needed to be done to accommodate this increase in student attendance, we found that by utilizing our largest spaces, which are the library, the gym, and the cafeteria, it would not only enable us to keep some of our largest classes completely whole, but it would also free up other additional spaces within our building. So this was a big aha moment for us when we started to do that work. We decided that the students that would be the most equipped to handle this change and that would be moving to those larger spaces, whether it be in the gym, the cafeteria, or the library, would be our upperclassmen, which for us at Schaefer is our 2nd grade students. So out of our K through 2 students, we feel like they would be the ones who would be most able to handle that move into a larger space. After that, we looked at all of our other spaces to see what could be done to effectively utilize every inch of the space we had with the current staffing that we had. We know that during the pandemic, staffing has been difficult with substitute teachers and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that our plan was solid and based off of the current staffing and space that we have. So while we were running the numbers on a daily basis, we continued to look at the numbers of each class and how many students are 100% virtual, how many students are 100% in person, how many students are hybrid. And so we look at those numbers as they change daily. And we found that some rooms, some classes would be able to accommodate the number of students in the class, and some classes would be unable to accommodate a whole class. But we could accommodate the additional students for those classes that wouldn't fit into a classroom by creating extended classroom spaces in these newly freed up classrooms that we created when we moved all the 2nd grade classes into larger spaces like the gym, the cafeteria, or the library. So I know that sounds a little tricky possibly, but we're going to explain that a little bit more. So our main goal is to make sure that we keep as many classes whole as possible. So 2nd grade classes will be remaining whole in additional spaces, and the other classes who can remain whole based off of the numbers of students who will be 100% in person and while maintaining 6 feet social distancing, they will remain whole in their classroom. But when we were unable to remain whole based off of the numbers, and again, the social distancing aspect of 6 feet, we will be looking to divide up that class. And when we say divide up, we want to make sure that everyone knows that it is flexible. The groupings of students will be flexible and the use of space will be very flexible. And that is a big piece of our plan. So let's say if we have Mr. Galvin has a class, we're not able to accommodate that whole class in one classroom. We will divide those students up into 2 groups flexibly. We're not going to always have, the same. And one group of students will be in the classroom at one time, and the other group of students will be in an extended classroom space. And in those extended classroom spaces, there might be 5 students from that class. So in order to optimize the staff that we have here in the building, if there was another class on the same grade level who also needed additional space and had their class split into 2 groups, we would have the additional students from that class join together and they would be in that extended learning space. So that plan would allow us to use the current staff members we have as much as possible. For any extended classroom spaces in kindergarten, we would have our kindergarten teaching assistant with the students in the extended classroom spaces. And for any combined 1st or 2nd grade classes, student teachers would work with teachers to support the students in the extended learning spaces. We know that in order for this to be successful, we will need all hands on deck at all times. We are also looking at how we would need to have our lunch aides support us during possibly arrivals and dismissals, because we'll have the social distancing as well as the health and safety procedures currently in place will continue. So we will be taking temperatures at the door every morning. So we would need to make sure we have additional safeguards and additional staffing in place to make sure that's successful and as efficient as possible. We're also looking at how our aides and assistants can help us with dismissal, as well as for additional lunch deliveries and coverages where needed. In terms of transportation, I know that Alicia and Michelle from transportation have been working on this for quite a bit, and they are working to accommodate the additional students on the buses and the routes. They have the routes already mapped out and ready to go, and that will be communicated out to families very soon. For food services, everything is staying status quo. So we will look to schedule additional aides to support lunch coverages as well as food delivery. And we have been working with Alicia and Jack from facilities to ensure that all health and cleaning procedures will remain intact that we currently have.
So I know one of the big questions that a lot of people must have now is what our Students' Day is going to look like. And just so everyone knows, one of the reasons why we've developed 2 plans with this process is because a lot of this does come down to numbers and how many students we could fit into each space. And we really need the numbers from our community to really help us move forward with the plan and process. So much of our Students' Day will remain the same. Teachers will continue to utilize technology to teach mini lessons to the students in front of them, to their 100% virtual students, as well as the students in the extended classroom spaces. Teachers will also be flexible with their schedules to make sure that they have direct contact with the 100% in-person students during the course of the day. Special area classes will push into the classrooms to deliver their lessons and will utilize Zoom to connect with their 100% virtual students and those students who are in the extended classroom spaces. With our PE, we are looking to utilize our beautiful campus as much as possible. Our master schedule and instructional support schedules will remain relatively intact. And we have worked out lunch schedules to make sure that our students would continue to be able to eat safely, their lunch and their snacks safely within their classrooms.
Great. So one other thing that I wanted to mention before we close up is that we were very fortunate. A few weeks ago, we went on a school visit to a school in Westchester, and we went with Mrs. Coster and Dr. Kulat, and we visited a school, a Westchester school in Byram Hills, and it is a K-2 school, the same exact size school, the same exact size student body, and that school has been back 100% in person since September. And seeing their spaces and speaking to the teachers at the kindergarten, first and second grade level, as well as speaking with the superintendent, was really extremely beneficial. And it really helped us kind of research what kinds of things did they try out, what were their successes, what were some things that they wanted to work on, refining, and that really helped us to really refine our plan. One of the other things that we wanted to mention that in speaking with them and looking at our own school building as well as our property here, and I know I say this to anyone who will listen to me, we're so fortunate here at William O. Schaefer. We have this gorgeous campus. We are far and wide, and we have so many opportunities here. This summer and early in the fall, Mrs. Coster and the facilities department delivered tons of beautiful picnic tables that we have sprinkled under trees throughout the campus. And we also have an outdoor classroom. We have several playgrounds that we utilize on a daily basis. It's a beautiful thing. There are students just all over. And that is one of the things that we have been talking to our team leaders as well as our staff about, utilizing those outdoor spaces. And the beauty of the April 6th return date is that with every passing day, the snow piles are getting less and they're melting. And, our hope is that with that, nicer weather will come and the classes will be able to spend as much time outside as possible in the fresh air and as a whole class. So if I'm a classroom teacher who has my whole class, great, go outside. If I'm a classroom teacher where my class is split, take my 2 groups and go outside. And that's a beautiful thing. So in closing, tomorrow we will be sending a communication out to families, and part of that communication will have a registration form. It'll be a Google form that we're asking families to complete, where we're going to ask you, obviously, information for your students, and then we're going to ask you what model your student is currently in and what model you would like to continue in for the remainder of the school year. At this point, we are asking families to really let us know if it'll be 100% in-person learning in school every day till the end of the school year, or 100% virtual until the end of the school year. And so those are the two options that we will have leading up to the end of the school year. In closing, we just want to take a moment to thank you all again for the opportunity to share this proposal with you. I hope you can see how excited we are to be able to bring all of our students back. Mr. Galvin and myself stand out front every day, and nothing brings us more joy than seeing our students and being able to see all of them come back and hop off the school bus and give us a virtual high five every morning would make us very happy. So we are very excited about that. And I will say that I speak for our staff and our teachers that they share in our excitement. I know a lot of them are on here this evening in support, and we had a great meeting the other day as well. I also want to thank all central office administrators, the facilities department, our instructional coaches, and our grade level team leaders, and of course our teachers for all of their support and their ideas as we undertake this great undertaking of bringing our kindergarten, first grade, and second grade students back. So thank you all for allowing us to share our plan with you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Beglin, and thank you as well, Mr. Galvin, for a very thoughtful presentation. I've invited the cabinet, administrative cabinet here this evening also to help answer any questions you might have. But I felt it was important, I think we all felt it was important that the building level leadership had the opportunity to present this plan, because quite frankly, they designed it. They designed it with the sort of insight and expertise of the teachers who actually occupy those spaces, those experts who understand those spaces and the needs of the kids better than anyone. So again, thank you folks for that. I would like to open up now to the Board of Education for your questions, comments, or concerns. And if you have any input you'd like to share with us at this point, we would be certainly happy to listen to those comments.
Does any board member have a question? Dan, I see you raised your hand, or Mr. Lombard, I see you raised your hand.
So thank you for the update. I think it's really exciting to hear the plans and appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. The question I had, I was just curious, in the modeling and analysis that was done in this plan, what did you assume from a capacity perspective? Did you assume that all students come back 100% in person, or trying to understand, do you have a capacity constraint, and you potentially find out that more students are going to be coming in than we can actually accommodate in person?
That's actually a great question. So our plan started with us really looking at kindergarten. And so we were like, all right, so how do we accommodate our kindergarten classes? Remain whole, some can't. What are we going to do? We're going to find possibly 10 additional spaces to support those kindergarten classes. And then as we started to do our research and we went to visit the school in Westchester, we came back and, Ms. Coster, Dr. Kulot, myself, and Mr. Galvin were like messaging each other, up until all hours of the night with excitement. And we were typing away on our Google Doc and we were like, whoa, wait a second. We're not going to look just like at kindergarten in isolation, because if we look at kindergarten in isolation, our thoughts of moving forward with first grade and second grade would be almost wiped out, because we would have used all of our additional spaces just for kindergarten. And so when we start to look at it in a more creative way, we said, wait a second, this is super exciting. We can accommodate our whole school. And so literally that night we were like, this is the plan. We're ready to go. We can accommodate the entire school, or we can accommodate, like Mr. Galvin said, our other plan would be the students who are currently 100% or 100% hybrid right now. So it started with just kindergarten. And then, through our research and our school visits, we thought, you know what, let's get all of our K-2 students back, and we know we can do it.
So just to confirm, so technically, if every single student decides to come in full-time, you've got a plan that could accommodate them. Granted,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Likely not everybody will come in, but I would just hate to find out that we get oversubscribed with interest and can't accommodate
Absolutely.
families. So glad to hear it. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I think to your question, just kind of like Mrs. Beglin was saying, one of the trickiest things about this was trying to come up with plans without numbers of what everything would look like. So what we kind of did, kind of like what you said, is we really looked at it first at the biggest scale. So what would happen if every single student were to come back? And we also looked at it along the lines of where we currently are with our 100% virtual learners, as a good estimate, where if most of those have stayed consistent throughout the course of the year, maybe they would. So it's kind of two contingencies to plan for everything and then for where we currently are right now.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lee.
I think I understood that there is the other option that if parents decide that they want to stay 100% remote, that would be the other option, you know, versus a majority that replying said they would like to be in person. Will there be an opportunity for those parents who choose after they make that decision to switch to 100% remote? I recognize that, you know, it's only a short period of time to the end of the school year, but that was one of the options that we had currently in the hybrid versus 100% remote model.
So I think we were saying, and Dr. Kulak, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were saying that we were looking for parents to commit to what the plan would be from here until the end of the school year. So, and really it's because it is so heavily based on numbers. So literally it could be one person who could, it could be one student that would kind of shift our plan a little bit. So we're asking in the communication we're sending home that families commit to 100% in-person learning or 100% virtual learning until the remainder of the school year.
So I'm a little confused now because I thought I just heard when Mr. Lamadrid had asked the question about the models that were built, that it was built based on 100% of the students, you know, coming back to the schools. So if, say, 10% decide to, you know, do 100% remote, but they wouldn't be able to switch back because you would then set the model for 90% and it has to be solid on the 90%. It can't deviate.
So the thing I think that would shift it is that, so let's say if one class, we're basing the numbers off of the data that we'll be getting back from families next week. So like, let's say we have a class that is, so we get the information back and let's say 3 families say that they're going to remain 100% virtual until the end of the school year. Those 3 students might make a change of whether or not we would have to split that class into 2 classes or keep that class whole. So, so we might have that class remain in their classroom and say, okay, you guys are remaining whole now because, you know, the data that we received back from all the families tell us that, you know, those 3 students are going to remain virtual to the end of the school year. If we have one student change their mind, you know, from here, you know, April until June, have to say, okay, we can no longer accommodate them in one class, and then we would have to split the class. And like I said, if we know that information up front, we can just right off the bat, you know, we are able to accommodate all those students, but we would know starting on April 6th, that class is automatically split. So, so that would be really kind of the thinking behind why it would be important for us to have that information and really ask families to commit to that as soon as possible next week.
Okay.
If I could just add, Ms. Lee, we
Sure.
will have a percentage of students who will remain virtual. So, you know, once April 6th comes, there will be a percentage of kids that remain 100% remote for the remainder of the year. We just don't know what percentage.
Yeah.
And so what Brian shared is we plan for 100% of the kids coming in down to currently what we have, and we could even accommodate more distance learners if we had to.
Okay. And then the next question I have is, so, you know, we have, I think, a really good plan on what would happen if there's a positive COVID test in a staff member or one of the students. With this new model, with more students being in the building, is there any modifications or changes that need to be made to, you know, to that procedure? Have we taken a look at that?
That's a great question. So we've talked extensively about how we feel like there's been good success here at William O. Schaefer this year with the protocols and the procedures that have been in place, and therefore we are not planning on making any changes. We are bringing in more students, obviously, so we're going to be adding in all of our students. However, temperature checks at the front door will remain. You know, the hand sanitizer right after the hand, temperature check will remain. Students will remain eating their snacks and their lunches in their classroom. Their shields and barriers are still in place. Students and staff members will still be masked. We also have students separated by 6 feet in all spaces. We're going to be utilizing the outdoor spaces as much as possible. And on top of that, we also have very detailed seating charts for each of our classrooms that we will be putting into place so that we know which students are sitting next to each other when, in the event, God forbid, we do have to look to do a contact tracing. And at that time, we'll be able to tell which students were within 6 feet of each other. So really, yes, we are adding a lot more students back into the school, but all of the procedures, all of the processes, all of the cleaning procedures will remain intact as they have been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What we also had to do when Ms. Beglin talked about staffing was just with the increased numbers. One of the things that Mr. Rallo and I looked at alongside with Ms. Beglin was just making sure that the staffing was set in terms of cleaning and sanitizing to handle the numbers, especially with our youngest learners having snack and lunch in the classrooms continuing. And that level is obviously increased. So we've made arrangements to use our existing staff and rearrange some schedules to make sure that those appropriate supports were still in place during the school day. But I have to say the Schaefer staff this year is as much like our other buildings. It really has been all hands on deck, especially at arrival and dismissal. We just had to make sure that we could keep up with the level of cleaning and sanitizing during the school day. So we have provided some extra support to that end.
I also just want to, if it's okay, I just want to give a shout out to our 5, 6, and 7-year-olds who come in with masks on every morning now. We are like, look at your mask. Oh my God, that's amazing. I love it. That's our morning conversation. And also it is an amazing thing to see those children come off the school bus, socially distancing without us reminding them. We have, tape and markers outside the school, but in line with their social distancing. They have their masks on and they all wait until they do their fist pump for their temperature read. And then we have a staff member who's holding, I think, a 5-gallon, jar of hand sanitizer. So everyone gets their squirt, and it is really just amazing. And it just shows the resilience and how amazing young children are and how they're better than a lot of us, right? For following procedures and getting used to things.
And I think one of the things that, with Ms. Beglin talking about the morning procedures and everything else, one of the things that we're really seeing from this whole process of having to use our spaces differently and how kids come and leave the building and how we really do have such an amazing outdoor campus here. We feel like during this whole process of this school year, we have really fully utilized and done things that we haven't done in my 5 years here. For example, when we started getting all the snow and some of our blacktop spaces got covered, we started closing off our front driveway so that we could utilize that as an additional recess space for kids to go outside and be able to move and take movement breaks and mask breaks outside. We're also using pretty much every inch of grass that we can when weather is permitting. And when weather isn't permitting, when we have those some of those lines that are going in, we've even learned how to flex those lines so that all of our students don't have to wait outside in the rain and they can be covered the entire time by using our walkways to the side that are completely covered. So it's been a learning process. And I think even with some of our dismissal process, with utilizing our outside where we used to have all these families come into our building, on some days, I think we're dismissing close to 80 or 90 students within 6 to 7 minutes by the time we get outside, which is pretty impressive for kids who are 5 to 7 years old. So just kind of like Ms. Beglin said, it's so interesting to see how quickly kids adapt and also how much we're learning and how we can use spaces in a different way moving forward.
That's great. Thank you. Great job. And welcome back, Ms. Beglin.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be back. Thanks.
I just have a few questions. And yes, Ms. Beglin, it is so nice to see you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
I just want to, if you could walk me through what the second grade is going to look like a little bit, right? I feel really nervous about all those 7 and 8-year-olds in the gym. And I just think of the noise level and how that's going to work for lessons, for concentration, for lessons. So if you could just explain to me a little bit more how that space is going to work.
Sure. That's a great question. I felt the same way when I first being a kindergarten, first grade teacher. I was like, no way. But then we saw it in action, and true to form for our elementary school teachers, like they can take whatever space, they can take a storage unit and make it the most beautiful space in the world. And so when we went to Byram Hills and we saw different spaces, we saw classrooms, we saw, the computer lab, we saw the library, the gym was the most amazing. And we walked in there and it was like a wonderland on how they set it up and the way that the teachers have creatively came up with different ideas for helping children understand 6 feet social distance or whatever it might be. So I agree, Mrs. Stepanian. I felt the same way when I even thought about that being a possibility. But so in talking with Dr. Kulat, Mrs. Coster, myself, and Brian Galvin, of course, and Ms. Sorello have been really walking those spaces, I would say several times a week, and looking to see, what does the space look like? What do we need to make this safe for our students and for our staff members, and make it the best possible learning space for our students. So, perfectly it worked out this year that we got a new divider in the gym. It's like a heavy duty curtain. So we have that. When we did the square footage measurements I'll just start with the gym. We learned that we can socially distance safely and by dividing up very nicely 4 full second grade classes in that space. So that sounds like a lot, but when we looked at it, what we
four on each side of the divider.
No, four classes fully in the gym. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you think about our gym, we have a curtain that divides it half, and then we're going to have barriers built by the facilities team. They're going to be starting to work on that like Friday night, and that will be built down the other side as well. We'll also have areas where, like, if the class is on the far side, there will be a hallway built and constructed so that they can walk by without, waving and distracting the class they're walking past. So the barriers and the curtains will be in place, and then we will have student desks, which a lot of our staff members have been asking for. We'll have desks set up for all of the students, and then Mr. Brady has already has the smart boards on order that will be on wheels. There's sound hooked up to that. We'll have everything that we need. We're allowing time. We've given some time, and we will continue to give time for classroom teachers to figure out what supplies they want to bring with them. Obviously, we're not looking for them to move everything on down there for the time that we have left for the school year. But the superintendent we spoke with in Westchester said to kind of think about it as like going on vacation and subletting an apartment, and kind of pack your backpack and bring what you need for that time. So we're not bringing every piece of material we ever need, but the materials that we need for the classroom, for the units of study that we have left for the remainder of the year. So we will have desks, we will have space for the teacher, we will have the walls constructed, the barriers, we'll have the smart board in place. All of that will be in place. And we've also prioritized keeping our ENL cluster classes together in that space, because those classes really work and collaborate quite a bit together, as well as share an ENL push-in teacher who works with those teachers and students as well. So we felt like that would be a great way to prioritize and also to encourage more collaboration they already do a ton of collaboration, but to allow that to be as free as possible. Similarly, we're looking to accommodate 2 full second grade classes in the cafeteria, and that's quite a bit easier, and especially it was perfect timing that we got those doors in the cafeteria. That couldn't have happened at a better time. We use them all day, every day for so many different purposes. Thank you for that. And so with that, we're able to divide our cafeteria down across, and we'll be able to have 2 classes in that space. Similarly, in the library, we're going to be able to accommodate 2 classes as well. And we'll have a divider down the center as well. And so, we do also have some second grade classes. And again, it's a numbers kind of a thing. We're looking at possibly maintaining 2 or 3 second grade classes that can possibly stay in their classrooms based on their numbers. So to answer your question, yes, that was a concern of mine when we saw it in action, and we had extensive conversations with, there were 3 teachers that we talked to in Byram Hills who are currently, set up in the gym. And it almost seems like they will be squatting there and not moving out at the end of the school year. They were like, we're never leaving. This is amazing. And it's a huge space. So I hope that we have a similar problem come June here at Schaefer, but we want to make sure that we set up the best, most comfortable spaces for students.
And thank you, is there a plan to break the news to the second graders that they're going to be making this move? And I'm sure that you'll come up with some way to make it fun and exciting and, almost
Absolutely.
like an adventure for them, but it still is, it's a jump for them, taking, because they are still, I know they're the upperclassmen, but they are still
Second graders.
They're tiny. Yeah. They're babies.
Well, that's why I joke that there's upperclassmen, but they're 7 and the others are 5. So yeah, it's the range we have. That's a great question and something that we very thoughtfully have been thinking about and talking to our team leader, Ms. Pam Bartel, as well as the team about. One of the things that we're thinking is that, they unfortunately will be leaving us in a few months to go to Cottage Lane, but that's one thing that we could say is, we're so fortunate that for the last few months of school, we get to all come together. And, we're not able to all come together into our classroom, but we have an additional learning space that we get to go to. And how cool is that? It's the gym. Or how cool is that? It's the library or the cafeteria. And one of the reasons that we're so grateful to Mrs. Coster and the facilities team is for allowing us to hand over those spaces this weekend. And that was kind of a big thing that I really pushed for, and I didn't have to push for because we were all on the same page, but we want to hand over those spaces this weekend because I know for our youngest students, they don't walk in on April 6th and be like, whoa, where am I going? Like I see my teacher in a gym and I see desks there. What is that about? So by having our spaces handed over this weekend, desks and everything will be set up. They're still probably going to be working on the dividers because that's going to take time and we want that done right. So we're not rushing on that, but the desks will be set up. Teachers will start to get in there and we still have 2 weeks before spring break. And so our A students and our B students will be here. And the plan is for teachers to know once we get the data back on Wednesday of next week, hopefully, by Thursday, Friday, we'll be able to figure out. And for some of those spaces, we're literally picking names out of a hat for teachers and spaces to determine who goes where. And so the students will get to see those spaces. And that was a big thing that I was very passionate about, having our students in each group to know, okay, this is going to be our spot. Sit down in your chair. That's going to be your chair. How cool is this? We're in the cafeteria. We're all together. We're going to have a party. It's going to be like a reunion. We're all going to be back together on April 6th in the gym, but we're back together. And so every child will get to see that space prior to coming back on April 6th, where they'll all go in together. Okay. So yeah. And we're still having those conversations with second grade. So they might be planning something more, but for us, that was really the big.
Right. Okay. I have one more question.
Sure.
And that's focusing on the younger grades then, kindergarten and first grade. So and from what I understand, if the classes can stay in one room, they'll stay in one room. For those that need to be split into 2 groups. Mm-hmm. So, and I think I heard you say that the kids, those will be sort of rotating. It's not going to be an A group and a B group and it's going to stay that way, but they'll be rotating. So and I'm sure that will be depending on what the lesson is, what the plan is for the day. And that is all subject to change to, so many things. Is that secondary room will be the teaching assistants? Is that right?
Correct. In kindergarten, it will be the teaching assistant. And the reason why we're doing that is because that is a teacher that our kindergartners are very familiar with. And the protocol, they know our curriculum, they know that we instruct the way we instruct our students. So if a teacher, let's say, is deciding to, Zoom her lesson in on the smartboard to that extended classroom space, and the, teaching assistant is going to kind of be showing it on the smartboard, then they can follow up and support the students in their independent work, just as they would in the classroom. In the first grade classes, in that case, we have student teachers who will be working with operating teachers as their mentors, and they would be in the extended learning space with those teachers' students.
And then, is the main teacher, would the main teacher go back and forth between the 2? Would the kids, like how much of their time per day would be spent in the room without their classroom teacher, I guess is my real question.
Yeah, great question. So that's something I can't give a percentage just yet. Mm-hmm. So one of the big things that that our teachers are very passionate about is having FaceTime with all of their students every day. So obviously they're not going to be able to teach every lesson to both of them every day, but they know that throughout the day, all of the students will have FaceTime with them. Throughout the day, they will be very thoughtful throughout the day and the week about, if I'm teaching a readers workshop to this group in person, then the next day I'm going to teach it to that group in person. If I'm teaching a readers workshop, whatever, let's say if I'm, they decide to teach a phonics lesson and they're like, I'm going to do it in both rooms, that they're being thoughtful about the time of day that they're doing it with the different groups. So we don't have a percentage that we can give right now. It depends on a lot of different things, but I would say that, our team leaders are already developing mock schedules of what that could look like. We've already met with our instructional coaches and our team leaders to talk about the different content areas, what units of study we have for the remainder of the school year, what supplies we would need, what those units look like, what are the goals, and then how we can very thoughtfully plan that curriculum and the instruction to make sure that all of the students, regardless of what space they're in, we're flexibly grouping the students, but also flexible with our schedule and thoughtful to make sure that all students have that face time. And it's not like we're saying that, if I'm a big student and I'm in that extended learning classroom space, I'm there for the week and I won't see my teacher until the next week, or even for a day is too much. So it will be fluid throughout the day.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things we're talking with our staff is, this is a little bit of a different model and a new take on some of the model. Things is once we start to work with the model, kind of like we did this year, is we're going to learn things and we're going to learn what's working best and what isn't. And I think one of the things that we want to look at is we want to be able to provide flexibility where it can be fluid, where we can try different things out within that model to really see what's the most successful for all of our kids and how we can continue to push this to make it most successful. And I know some of the conversation that we were really having with our staff at the beginning of the year is while we're adapting to this new way of education and these new systems that we're using, is that we don't always want everything to look on day one how it looks at the end of the year. And that's been one of the things that we've been preaching. And I think that's one of the things that we're thinking about with this model too. How it looks on April 6th, we're also looking for it to grow because we're going to learn different things about it in real time and adapt to it so that we can meet all of our kids' needs.
And I think the important thing to remember here too is that, and I think this is something that our teachers have become experts on this year, is that we're not reliant on the space, we're not reliant on the furniture or the supplies, but rather moving to the students. So we go to where we need to go instead of saying, okay, this is my space, So that's been a big thing this year as well. That's been successful.
I said that was my last question, but I lied. Actually, one's a question and then a comment. I haven't heard in any of this that there's going to be a need for additional staff, to hire additional staff. Mm-hmm. Is that something that is being considered? Is that something that's going to be needed? Is that on the table?
That's a great question. When we started to first talk about this, I was like, we need 10 more kindergarten teachers, think about just in isolation, okay, how are we going to do kindergarten? We're going to split them and we need 10 more teachers. But then so when we took that school visit, it changed all of our thinking and we started to really kind of think through how is this going to look? And we know that because of COVID, just getting a substitute to come cover for one day is a very difficult task. Shout out to Ellen Hennessy, our secretary, who is up at 4 a.m. coordinating substitute every day, and she starts the night before. So we knew that would be a very heavy lift. But we also knew that we have an expert staff here in the building and people that we trust and who love our students. And so we wanted to make sure that we were leveraging the staff members that we have here. And so when we started to look at what this plan could look like, we knew that we have the most amazing kindergarten teaching assistants who, take over for our teachers and they support our teachers and they have been trained by our teachers. And so who better to be with our kindergarten students than the people who have been helping and supporting the curriculum for all these years. So that just happened to work out to be a perfect model. And then from there, we felt similar with the first grade students who needed to be in split spaces. We have these amazing student teachers who have been working under Dr. Karen Tessick and Joe Lloyd, and they've been over at the, I want to say Knights of Columbus, but I know it's not. I know it's the Sons of Italy, right? There, and they've been working with our students and they are desperate to get here in the building. And so, I've been speaking to teachers, about their student teachers, and they're like, oh my gosh, I have these three, these amazing student teachers, we want to get them in. And so again, what better experience than to have the teachers that we are literally mentoring right now and teaching to be, kind of carrying on with the strategies and the instructional, practices that we're putting into place in the classroom. And similarly, we have an amazing aid staff here at the building. So our teaching aides, the minute they heard our plan, I have to say, they were coming into the office and saying, what can we do to support? We want our kids back. How can we help? Let us know. Do you need us in the morning? Do you need us in the afternoon? And so we've already started to get that support. And so when we looked at all those schedules and adding, because really we just added a ton more lunch times, but not, it's just, they're different because we're adding different spaces. Kids are not combining to eat lunch. So with that and very thoughtful planning of a schedule, we're able to do it all with the staff we have here in place.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your hard work in putting this together. It's very exciting, the idea of getting, it's like getting the band back together. We're like, it's and as long as everything can be done safely and everybody can stay safe and healthy, then it's all very exciting. My one last comment is I hope there is a way to make Gym City happen this year.
Oh, yes.
For William O'Shafer parents everywhere. I hope there's a way to make Gym City happen.
You know what? I was just talking about that with a teacher today. It might be an outside Gym City.
Yeah. We will do everything we can to make sure Gym City's still there.
Bring your bike to school day. Everyone will ride their bike.
That would be great.
Yes, yeah. We are thinking about it. We're thinking about what a field day, obviously we wouldn't be able to open it to spectators, but what would that look like? So we are, our staff members and our gym and our special area teachers, they're definitely thinking thoughtfully, creatively and out of the box to see how we can honor those traditions and those memories for our students and make it still happen because they need it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Administrators, you may have to look at Schaefer because I think all of us want to spend some more time at Schaefer after April 6th.
I want some balloons out front that day, Alicia.
First day.
Yeah.
Ms. Beglin, this is Tom Henry. I thought I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the extended classroom of one class might join up with the extended class of another.
Correct.
So I was just curious, like who would be teaching that combined extended class? Would there be two aides in there or how would that work?
Great question. So that's something that we've kind of like played out with quite a bit. And that's where our team leaders and our instructional coaches have really helped us with creating some mock schedules. So, so the reason why we are putting the two groups from two different classes together is because of purposes of space and purposes of coverages. So, and like I said, it could be 3 children who are overflowing, or it could be up to 12. So, we felt like rather than having a room with 3 kids in it, let's combine them and make it a more dynamic and learning environment for those students and to have the support of a staff member that we have here in the school. So, so those 2 classes joined together would be supported by 1 teaching assistant or 1 student teacher. And it will still be, maintaining social distancing. So it would all be, under the amount that is allotted in the class. And we also are having thoughtfully kind of planning out which teachers' classes would be joined together, because that also opens up opportunities for collaboration and possibly team teaching as well on that front. So, we already spoke with our instructional coaches last week and our team leaders who have been instrumental in helping us with this year. And we talked about, okay, if I'm a first grade teacher and, my students are in an extended learning, extended classroom space with another teacher, how can we look at possibly doing some team teaching for science and social studies? Or how can we look at team teaching for, whatever it might be, phonics or math or whatever it might be. So, that's something that we definitely we're thoughtfully planning that, like I said, for purposes of space, creating a dynamic environment for students where they have more students to kind of have conversations with, as well as for purposes of staff members. And the collaborative piece is kind of like an added extra for us when we think about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So considering I'm left, I appreciate the presentation. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And, just being cognizant of time and where we are in the overall agenda, the board members have asked the majority of questions. But the only thing I want to add, and it's really not a question, it's more of a comment that, I'm going to parlay to Dr. Pritchard to expand upon is, so much of this plan was developed around the space allocations of the building and the criteria and guidance and regulations from the Rockland County Department of Health, as well as the New York State Department of Health and the CDC. So while we're starting here at William O. Schaefer, I'm sure there's many parents on the line, questioning, well, what about me? So, I think we need to reassure the other parents in the district and the other students in the district that this is the first step. And, based upon the guidance and space allocations of William O. Schaefer, we're able to bring these students back sooner than the other students. But along with this planning, there's also planning at the other buildings as well. And maybe Dr. Pritchett, if you could just, expound upon that a little bit so that the other students and teachers and parents know that we're addressing them and their time will come as well.
So your question is well received, Mr. Jacobs. So there's a structure currently in place that we have used successfully to reopen our schools. And we've done this not in a vacuum, as you've suggested. We've done it not only with the guidance of CDC and social distancing and mitigation strategies and the like. We've also done it with the input from our key stakeholder groups, to include our parents, community members, teaching staff, and administrative team. So we are going to develop this reopening plan under the auspices of the district-wide task force that we had engaged last year at this time, or right about this time. I've asked Dr. Kulat to spearhead that effort, as he did very successfully last year. That task force, I believe, has inspired a great amount of confidence in our community. And it has, again, it is a trusted working group. Dr. Kulat will have a timeline for the board's review prior to distribution to the community at large. But I know that Dr. Kulat will have more to share in the days ahead. But we are going to run those decisions through the existing task force. And we are going to consider the lessons learned from Ms. Beglin, Mr. Galvin, and their team at William O. Schaefer. You just, I know that there are efforts, there are 669 school districts across the state of New York, and each one has their own unique plan as it relates to reopening. And either fortunately or unfortunately, that's what we've inherited. But we do have 1 year's worth of experience under our belts. We're going to, as Dr. Stepanian mentioned, we're going to get the band back together again. We're going to consider those lessons learned that we've encountered over the year, as well as ensuring that we're able to marshal the appropriate resources, because quite frankly, William O. Schaefer has, we're looking at things like furniture and protective barriers and things that we already have in stock, but we've had to reallocate and redistribute resources, labor as well, to ensure that we had, we want to get this right. We want success gets success. And if we can do this successfully, we can inspire our stakeholders and regain confidence and courage, and that goodwill that we're known for, that togetherness spirit. We'll leverage that into the other projects as well. So I think I do have Dr. Kulat on the line. I don't know if he wants to contribute any more to that. But Brian, if you want to add to that, I'm certainly
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Pritchard. Yeah, getting the band back together. So we did have a successful task force, close to 40 people, all stakeholders, students, parents, teachers, starting last summer at the beginning, really before that in June, to get ready for opening school this year. And looking forward, absent of any change in guidance, We really need to start thinking about, how to get all of our kids back in person full time. As everybody suggested, that's our ultimate goal. And we are going to look at the model and plan that we're implementing at William O. Schaefer. We do have space constraints, particularly at Cottage Lane Elementary School, that are very different than William O. Schaefer. And we have other challenges when it comes to secondary, but that's the purpose of getting the task force back together. That task force will also then launch the subcommittees that existed last year for areas in curriculum and instruction, finance and management, facilities, PPS, Dr. Tessik's team, including special education. And all of those subcommittees will also work on plans so that we can figure out how to get all kids back in person. Obviously looking towards next year in particular, because again, knowing that we have to maintain 6 feet social distancing, knowing the guidance that we're dealing with right now, we can't just wait and hope that things are going to change. So it is a little bit of a disruption and change to the instructional program, as you've heard. It's utilizing all the spaces in the buildings. It's utilizing outdoor space. It's really rethinking and reimagining how we can group kids safely for instruction. We're also, as we're making this plan, we would be in a position to pivot should guidance change from the health department. So the task force will convene within the next 2 weeks, and we'll start making plans, and we'll be sharing that out with the Board of Education and the community as we move forward. So thank you.
Are there any other questions from the Board of Education that we can answer? Well, pending any other comments or questions, I'll say that this concludes the superintendent's report for this evening, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you, everyone.
Next up on the agenda is the committee reports. I know we had a board meeting last Wednesday evening. Prior to that board meeting on Tuesday evening, there was a facilities committee meeting that addressed more discussion on the proposed summer of 2022 capital work, as well as discussing longer range planning for capital work. Were there any other committees that met that we have a committee report for? Dr. Stefanian?
Yes, the Equity Coalition met this week. Let me just find my notes here in this mess, just so I give a full report. The Equity Coalition met this past Tuesday. We had again a very full meeting. Just to give a brief overview of what we talked about, the first half of the meeting was the subcommittees that met separately on their own, and those subcommittees are curriculum, access, outreach, and pupil personnel services, and finances and staffing. Each of those subcommittees met separately and reported back to the group for the first part of the meeting. I was able to also report sharing information from the policy meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, sharing the policy number 0105, equity, inclusivity, and diversity in education, and just sharing what we spoke about in the policy committee, and looking for some feedback from the Equity Coalition. And then the second half of the meeting was a student presentation, in which I am always blown away by our students and their thoughtful, and I mean they're just great, thoughtful, intelligent presentation, so insightful. And they talked about their own experiences and perspectives and ideas in our district, in the classroom, in experiences with other classmates and with teachers, and it just it was really quite amazing. At the end of the meeting, Ms. Citrullo, well, not in the meeting, after the meeting, Ms. Citrullo posted the district's latest expanding equity article. This one is highlighting the parents who were part of the coalition. And again, I am just amazed by the group of parents who are part of the coalition. And so if you haven't read that article yet, I suggest that you do so. It really highlights the group of powerhouse moms that are part of the coalition. So successful meeting. I'm very excited about it, as you can tell.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes. I'm glad you're very enthused about it, and I'm glad you're picking that aspect up for the other board members. We truly appreciate it. Are there any other committee reports?
Yeah, I'll just expand upon what Kara said. We did have a policy meeting since our last, I think it was last week. 7 policies. The new one, the new business policy was on the gender neutral single occupancy bathrooms, which you saw is going through our first reading. So any feedback on that? I know, Lonnie, you had given some feedback, but we did review the equity and inclusion and diversity and policy, as well as school district records, accountability, library materials selection, curriculum management, and textbook selection adoption.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, moving forward to policies for review, as Ms. Lee spoke, the policy 0101 gender neutral bathrooms is up for the first reading. I had made one comment about it, that I just request that when we look into signage, we're cognizant about the language in the policy, and we choose an appropriate sign for the facility. So does anybody else have any other comments regarding the first reading? I see head nods. So, based upon that, I would suggest that we put it on the agenda for the next board meeting. Everybody okay with that?
Agreed.
Yeah. Again, I see head nods, so that's good. All right. Next up on the agenda is the board discussions, changes to the consent agenda. So, Dr. Pritchard or Alicia, I have a question about this. Normally, with regard to changes to the consent agenda of a particular item, we normally call for a motion, and then before we do the vote, we ask whether there's any discussion on that particular item. Is it okay to stay with that process for this evening?
It is, Mr. Jacobs, as long as with any changes to the agenda, that if there were any changes to the number 5, as that's identified separately from items 6 through usually 10 for the consent. If there's any changes, that those are taken separately under that motion.
Okay, bear with me 1 minute, because I just want to see. Yeah, so item 5, the superintendent's office agenda would be handled separately from the item 6 through, what is it, item 7 through 10. Okay. So we'll do it as we normally do. The only thing I want to say with regard to changes to the consent agenda, the board received various emails regarding the athletic program, and we followed up with some further guidance from our council, as well as other healthcare professionals, and we asked for the presentation this evening by Mr. Strauss to clarify the surveillance screening protocol. And based upon what the board heard from these professionals, the board is remaining consistent with its previous consent agenda and previous resolutions regarding the athletic program. The board's focus is on the athletic program, but it's also focusing on protecting the entire school community and the best practices for reopening, as we just heard the presentation on reopening one of our elementary schools, and that's a main focus of the district, to try and reopen all the buildings as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Moving forward, may I have a motion to approve the superintendent office agenda?
Make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing head nods indicating none. May I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6 through, and just bear with me. It's items 6 through 10.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? And I have some discussion. With regard to the finance and management service consent agenda, item, it's under item 9G. Resolution to accept claims order report. And then it goes further down. It's not itemized. The capital project scope of work. Is everybody with me? We break down in there, in particular for the William O. Schaefer buildings, the Cottage Lane Elementary building, the Tappan Zee High School bathroom renovations, and then further down, the Tappan Zee High School auditorium and the Soames bathroom renovations. As far as the resolution goes, do we have to be as specific as we are, not knowing what the funding level will be in terms of, we're establishing these budgets, but we don't know how the bids are going to come in. Can we be more generalized with the descriptions? And for example, for the TZ High School auditorium sound and audio visual, rather than say those specific systems, can we just have the resolution read, partial auditorium renovation, knowing that the auditorium and sound and the audio visual are, the primary, systems we want to focus on. But if there's funding issues in terms of bid results and so forth, that, we have latitude to potentially look at the rigging or some of the other medium to high priority items. Similarly with the Soames bathroom renovations, I'd rather see it just see, Soames bathroom renovations rather than be specific to a first floor and second floor bathroom. So I don't know whether Ms. Coster, you want to respond to my questions, or Dr. Pritchard?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
Dr. Pritchard. So, Mr. Jacobs, that would be fine because those were the two that were listed as alternative scopes of work. So what I would suggest is if we go general on the description, would also be to take off those two estimated dollar amounts, because those two alternates are part of, depending on how the bidding comes out for the 2022 scopes of work. So we'll need to come back to the Board of Education for approval based on those bid results and seek your further approval to proceed with the high school auditorium and the Soames bathrooms. So at this juncture, it really does not need to be overly specific because we will be coming back to you for further approval.
Okay, so that was where I was going next, was to remove the dollar values at this point in time. And then just going back up to above the line with regard to the number of bathrooms that we're mentioning, you know, the 8 bathrooms at William O. Schaefer and the 2 bathrooms at Cottage Lane. Do we need to be specific there, you know, for, again, fear that the bids come in and we can't do 8, we can only do 6? Do we have a problem if we've you know, specified 8 in the resolution, but only available funding for 6?
For Schaefer, since we're identifying the northeast wing, I would leave that. But again, we're coming back to you for your guidance and final approval based on how the bidding turns out. So I could take that out as well, and do the same thing for CLE in the high school in that as well, because basically what this was designed around, based on the information that we knew and some of our own investigation compared to similar work that we've done, we put a not to exceed budget there for that summer based on the parameters that we've been using. So I can certainly take that out. That doesn't prohibit us in any way from moving forward to design an SED submittal, because we need to come back to the board for direction and final approval.
But my concern is I don't want to tie our hands with a too prescriptive resolution.
Agreed.
The Board of Ed and the district administration knows what the intent is. But in terms of, you know, the official resolution, I'd like to have it, you know, a little bit more latitude there until we know more where the bids come in and what our budget stream is. So.
And I can certainly make those changes. I'm actually live now. So if that's perfectly acceptable, if that's what the board would like to do, I can make those edits as described. So that becomes voted on and approved based on the revised resolution as noted.
If you would do that, I think that would be helpful, considering Ms. Mascari is not feeling well this evening. So I don't know if she's listening, and to capture the notes could be challenging. So if you can make those edits live while we see it, and the board can agree with the revised agenda, then I think we can move this forward.
Okay. So I just want to.
The rest of the board on, you know, in agreement with this?
I'm fine with it. I also wanted to get, you know, didn't see a reason to put in the high versus the medium, because I think, you know, all of our scopes are important. And I didn't want to give the, you know, it almost sounds like, you know, one is not important or one is less important than the other. So I didn't think it was as relevant for this resolution to be part of, you know, as far as the scope of work.
Actually, that column's not even labeled, so we should just delete the text in that column.
That was even another thing, because it was a little, can be confusing.
Yeah.
Let me. Okay, so what I've done so far, just to recap, I've taken out the priority identification for each one of the scope of work listed on the resolution. And on summer 2022 scopes of work, I took out for Schaefer, Cottage Lane, and the high school, the quantities of the scope of work for each, the classrooms, and then the bathrooms at Cottage Lane, bathrooms at high school.
Ms. Coster, for clarity, can I ask you to just share your screen, since we're going to be voting on it?
You know, that would be, thank you, Mr. Jacobs. That would be easier, wouldn't it? Let's see. Okay. Can everybody see that okay? Sorry, lateness of the hour.
I see your screen now. I'm trying to read it. It's a whole other story. Hold on a second.
Let me try to make it bigger. And what I'll do is I'll scroll. Okay. How's that size? And I'll just scroll.
Much better.
Okay. And I'll just give you a minute to scroll. So
I think we're good with this section. It's the next section.
yep. So I took out all the quantities under Schaefer, and I just left the northeast wing.
Yep.
And then Cottage Lane, I just took out the number of gender neutral bathrooms. And then the high school, I just took out the quantity of bathrooms.
Okay.
take this off. I should take off this then. Let's see. It's gonna take this whole thing out. Just want to just take out the location.
Yeah, correct. That way we have more latitude if we run into an issue.
Perfect, agreed. Okay. And then these were the two alternates, leaving the auditorium as a partial renovation description.
Lonnie, did you want to get rid of first and second floor there?
Yeah, that's where she's going next.
Okay.
Yep, Mr. Henry.
Yes, I appreciate this much better.
No, this is great. Looking one more time, did I catch all the locations and everything? I think I did. Okay, Northeast wing. Okay. Does that look okay now?
Yes, as far as I'm concerned. Are the other board members in agreement?
Yeah, does it also make sense to take a look at the not to exceed numbers to be more rounded instead of to the, we could have cents too, but.
Well, yeah, I would make it $2,638,000.
Okay.
And just go back up to the,
You want me to do that too? Just
make it $437,000.
how's that look? Does that look okay now?
Are the other board members in agreement?
Yes, for Tom.
I see head nods for Dr. Stepanian and Mr. Lamadrid. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So may I have a vote for the motion to approve the consent agenda items 6 through 10 as revised?
Motion.
Second.
I was looking for a vote at that point. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Is there any new business? So I have new business with regard to planning the July reorg meeting. We have it tentatively scheduled for July 7th at 8 o'clock in the morning. And July 7th is a Wednesday. July 4th this year falls on a Sunday. So I would imagine the celebrated holiday is Monday the 5th. So does the 7th work for the members at this point in time?
Presumably, it's still a virtual meeting.
I don't know where we'll be at that point. It could be virtual, or we could be back in person. And then to further that, I don't know what the new guidance will be with regard to virtual meetings. Prior to all this, they allowed virtual meetings provided you announced where you were, so that other public could participate in your remote location. So I don't have a definitive answer for that at this point. I would say if it sounds good right now to hold the date of July 7th at 8 o'clock in the morning. And if we have conflict that arises, then we address it at that point in time. Whether we can address it through a virtual meeting or whether we have to reschedule it. There is some parameters in terms of when you have to hold the reorg meeting within, certain number of days after the 1st of July. So we'll have to keep that in mind. But right now, I'll tell Ms. Muscari to plan on July 7th at 8 a.m. Okay. Is there any other new business? I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate the staff's time. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:54 p.m.?
Motion.
Second.